Making bash script for handle file names with spaces, or workaround. Whilst I have been using bash for several years, my experience with bash scripting is relatively limited. My code is as below. It should grab the entire directory structure from within the current directory and replicate it into $dir. The problem is, here is a sample of my file structure. Note the spaces to s and for takes parameters word by word, so my script's output looks something like this. But I need it to grab whole file names, one line at a time, from the output of find. I have also tried making find put double quotes around each file name. But this doesn't help. An output with this changed line. Now, I need some way that I can iterate through like this, because I also wish to run a more complicated command involving gstreamer on each file in a following similar structure. How should I be doing this? Edit, I need a code structure which will allow me to run multiple lines of code for each directory file loop. Sorry if I was unclear. Solution, I initially tried. This worked fine for the most part. However, I later found that since the pipe results in the while loop running in a subshell, any variables set in the loop were later unavailable, which made implementing an error counter quite difficult. My final solution, from this answer on so. This later allowed me to conditionally increment variables within the loop which would remain available later in the script.
You need to pipe the find into a while loop. Also, you won't need to use printf in this case. You can make this proof against files with new lines in their names, if you wish, by using a null byte delimiter, that being the only character which cannot appear in a *nix file path. You will also find using $ instead of backticks to be more versatile and easier. They can be nested much more easily and quoting can be done much more easily. This contrived example will illustrate these points. Try to do that with backticks.
The issue you're encountering is the first statement is responding to the find as separate arguments. The space delimiter. You need to use bash's ifs variable to not split on space. Here is a link that explains how to do this. The ifs internal variable. One way around this problem is to change bash's internal ifs, internal field separator, variable so that it splits fields by something other than the default white space, space, tab, new line, in this case, a comma. Set your find to output your field delimiter after the %p and set your ifs appropriately. I picked semicolon since it's highly unlikely to found in your file names. The other alternative is to call dir from the find directly via exec. You can skip the for loop altogether. That's if you don't need to do any additional parsing.
See this answer I wrote a few days ago for an example of a script that handles file names with spaces. There's a slightly more convoluted but more concise way to achieve what you're trying to do though. Print 0 tells find to separate the arguments with a null. The -0 to zargs tells it to expect arguments separate by nulls. This means that it handles spaces fine. It tells zargs to replace the string with the file name. This also implies that only one file name should be used per command line. Zargs will normally stuff as many as will fit on the line. The rest should be obvious.
If the body of your loop is more than a single command, it is possible to use zargs to drive a shell script. Be sure to include the trailing dash, or some other word. If the shell is of the Born POSIX variety, it is used to set $0 in the shell script. Also, care must be taken with quoting, since the shell script is being written inside a quoted string instead of directly at the prompt.
If you want to support the channel, please consider liking and subscribing.